lifts me so that I can pick its single spring flower, the lowest one, maybe for my mother, maybe my father, but end up placing it inside my first and only dictionary, a gift for my father on the first day of that school year. And later, when it has dried, wilted, I remove it. Only a stain left, a small shadow, the handprint of a child quieting the words. Y'all might have questions. Look, I've only been here 2 months. Say y'all. Get acclimated.
I am struck by a couple of times in which you use the image of breath, and breath as the wine glass. That stayed with me. Do you have any comments about how you use the image of breath in your poetry?
I think there's something about that it's this, like, you have to breathe to exist, right? I mean, it's this kind of like fundamental thing that you need. I think there's something about, in poems, like the line and song and all of this. But as far as an image, especially with that poem in particular, I think because it's this thing that you can't see, unless it kind of changes form. So in that poem, the kind of like blowing, the glass blowing at the end through the wine glass, I think there's something about concretizing that or making it solid or material. And that image happens a lot with like fog of breath and all kinds of. But I think there's something about the sort of. It seems like it's not there and we take it for granted, but it's there all the time. And I feel like that might be some way of conceptualizing this, as I said at the beginning, this sort of gender identity that doesn't have like a concrete form, and it's actually in flux and it's changing and it's kind of mutating, and sometimes you see it and sometimes you don't, and then the sense that it's something interior that that I know and I experience, and maybe some people do, but it's not something that's always exteriorized to other people or comprehensible. So, I mean, that's my way of sort of understanding. Of course, when I sat down to write that poem, I wasn't thinking that. It's the kind of thing that ends up happening, but that's my way of understanding.
So I have become fascinated by grief for lots of different reasons, and my students in the GLBTQ lit class, and I spent a long time talking about The Well of Loneliness and then Orlando in the context of Heather Love's book Feeling Backwards and her ideas about letting shame and grief be what they are instead of recuperating them into a paradigm of pride. Okay, so that's like, put that. But I noticed that I feel like your book fits with that because the transformations that are in almost every poem, different kinds of images of transformation, seem so polar opposite to the usual traditional myths of transformation where you become something better, like a butterfly. And so I'm reading non-butterflyness in your work.
There are a lot of moths, but not butterflies.
I wondered if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, that's a hard question. It's a good question. It's funny because I actually, someone pointed out to me that actually this really wonderful writer, queer writer named Rigoberto Gonzalez actually asked me a question once about, he said something about, it seems like your book is less about transformation itself and more about the desire to transform. And I feel like there's something, I think that's true. I mean, certainly transformation happens through words and whatnot, but it does seem to be about this desire. And I think, and actually, and this is something that I read later on, Judith Butler has this really wonderful essay that I can't really understand. but my kind of productive misunderstanding is she takes on Freud's concept of melancholy, and I'm forgetting the name of the essay, but I remember this one phrase or this one idea that stuck with me, and again, I'm probably misunderstanding, but this idea of something that's to queer people that there's a kind of there's this term foreclosed that kind of your options for because of this sort of this is my way of understanding it, because of this sort of compulsory heterosexuality, you don't even have a chance to, your fate is sort of already sealed. So there's this sort of foreclosure on your right to even desire at all. And so I feel like there's something of that kind of grief happening in the book, like desiring these things, but not even being able to articulate, what that is to anyone in the language that we all use and understand, and in terms that we don't know. And I feel like so I guess that sense of that desire and that need for transformation, but it not being recognizable anywhere. I feel like that's my way of the way grief works. I don't know if that answered your question, but maybe it gives you more.
It does. It gives me a whole chunk for tomorrow's lecture.
What are you working on now?
I'm working on a couple of things. One, I'm working very slowly on this. I think it's a series of essays, or I think it hopes to be a series of essays that actually are the occasion for is beards, and so it's in the early stages, but and it's sort of essays might be misleading. I think it's sort of a hybrid genre of poem, essay, lyric essay that actually is taking a lot of other texts, for example, Chaucer and Shakespeare, and then on the other hand, stuff from queer theory like Judith Butler, and then it's sort of interwoven with more memoir stuff about my own experience of growing a beard and this sort of license of like passing or manhood or something that beards seem to symbolize. So it's very rough right now, and I'm that's a very different kind of project for me to be working on, because I think I tend to work better when I don't have any idea of what I'm doing and I'm just sort of feeling my way around in the dark. And so I'm still doing that with poems. Those first few poems I read, again, the same kinds of concepts, but they seem to be manifesting outside of being so explicitly couched in gender. Although I know that they're probably about gender. So poems and this weird amorphous beard project.
Does it have a press already?
I'm curious about, and this is a real tentative question, but perhaps about your relationship to place. You said you're